Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are decoding a pretty stark briefing. It makes the case that we are looking at a full-blown systemic collapse, and it's being fueled by a really deep generational divide. But it also points to one specific generation as our last line of defense, what it calls the designated analog override.
Okay, let's just dive right in. The first thing you have to understand from this analysis is that any sense of calm you might be feeling, well, it's an illusion. The source material says we're in a period called the Great Shaking, and it's not slowing down, it's getting more intense.
So the document calls the core of the problem a vascular standstill. I want you to think of the global flow of oil, food, data, all of it as our civilization's circulatory system. This analysis argues that this entire system is being choked off, like a blocked artery, and that leads to something they call industrial ischemia, which basically means the vital organs of our economy are being starved of oxygen.
Right, and this is a really crucial point. Any reports you see about things getting back to normal, the document dismisses them as a Gaussian mirage. Now, that's just a fancy statistical term for a blip that looks like a trend, but it isn't. The argument is that these are just brief pauses that are actually hiding a deep mechanical collapse that's happening right underneath the surface.
So how does all this start to paint a global picture? We're now looking at what the briefing calls a global logistical infarct. And an infarct, now that's medical jargon for tissue death because of a lack of blood supply. Think of a heart attack. This is a heart attack of the entire global supply chain.
This so-called sand table here maps out the failure points in some pretty grim detail. You've got the Strait of Hormuz, a critical oil artery, under a hard blockade. The main backup for that, the Saudi petrol line, is hit. And right here at home, our own systems are getting hit with cyber attacks. Now, the specific operational names, they're not as important as the pattern. The point is, these are not random accidents. They are synchronized failures hitting us at our absolute weakest points.
And here's the thing. This isn't a problem that gets fixed in a few weeks. If a major piece of our infrastructure goes down, say a petrochemical plant, the lead time for something as fundamental as an industrial heat exchanger is at least 3 years, and there are no stockpiles. We are literally looking at a multi-year void with no quick fix on the horizon.
And right here, you can see the dominoes start to fall. With oil choked off, energy prices are going to go through the roof. That directly jacks up fertilizer prices, which is a straight-up threat to our food supply. And at the exact same time, cyber attacks, they're not some abstract threat anymore. They are taking out 911 dispatch systems and planting code into the control systems for our water and our power grids.
But this crisis isn't just about failing hardware. The source material argues it's also a cognitive crisis, and it's rooted in a really deep generational divide. So let's dig into the human factor here.
So the analysis lays out this really stark contrast in how different generations are literally wired. On one hand, it defines Gen X as analog stable. They grew up in a pre-digital world, the latchkey kids who are forced to become independent. They have what's called mechanical gnosis, an intuitive understanding of how the physical world actually works. And then, on the other side, you have Gen Z and Alpha, the digital fluid. Their brains have been wired from birth for the constant stimulus of the internet, creating a deep dependency on those dopamine loops.
And the analysis here, man, it does not pull any punches. For a generation whose entire reality is filtered through the web, a grid-down event isn't just some inconvenience. The source predicts it will trigger a mass neurological crisis, a state of what it calls total withdrawal, when their main source of stimulus is just cut off.
And that brings us to the timeline. So the briefings estimate that for a digitally native brain to reset, it would need about 90 days of complete isolation from all that high-frequency digital stimulus. But here's the kicker. In the middle of a society-wide cascading failure, we just don't have 90 days to spare.
So, all of this brings us to the absolute core thesis of this entire briefing. Given the mechanical crisis and the cognitive crisis, the strategy pivots, and it focuses entirely on one specific group, Generation X.
And this is where the analysis gets personal. If you were born somewhere between, say, 1966 and 1980, this whole briefing is talking directly to you. It identifies you as the feral Sentinel. In this scenario, you are not just a demographic, you are a strategic asset.
Your entire life experience is being reframed here as a set of tactical advantages. That feral, latchkey childhood? Turns out it wasn't neglect. It was a feature that built self-reliance into your very wiring. You get how analog systems work. You're the bridge generation, taking care of your parents and your kids.
And most importantly, when the lights go out, your first instinct isn't to panic. It's to find the fuse box. It's to find the manual override.
Let's really lock in on this term, mechanical gnosis. It's that baked-in pre-digital know-how. It's knowing how to read a paper map, use a rotary phone, drive a stick shift. At its core, it's the ability to function when that digital interface that covers our entire world is suddenly ripped away. So, if you are the Sentinel, what's the takeaway? What are the immediate, practical steps you should be taking? Well, this is the action plan. This is your tactical manual for what comes next.
Okay, the number one directive is a hard pivot to what it calls analog manual override. First, air gap your critical systems. That means you physically disconnect your well pump, your solar panels, whatever, from the internet to shield them. Second, you audit your spare parts now. Remember that 3-year lead time we talked about? Third, consolidate your mana. That's the document's word for your essential resources, your wealth. Get it into your physical possession. And finally, you create analog redundancy. That means paper copies of every single vital document and map you have.
And finally, the briefing connects all of these practical preps to a much, much larger mission. See, this isn't just about your own personal survival. It's about securing the future.
The ultimate goal of this mission is defined by the Greek word kleronomia, which means inheritance. The whole point isn't just to get through the crisis yourself. It's to actively possess, to preserve, and to pass down your estate, your home, your knowledge, your resources, to the next generation.
And this right here is the key mindset shift that document is calling for. Don't think of all this as self-help or prepping. You need to frame it as lineage protection. Your role is to be a guardian, a sentinel protecting your family's future through a massive period of disruption.
And this slide really sums up your ultimate responsibility. When those digital supply lines are finally cut and the dopamine runs dry for the younger generations, you are the one who holds the mana, the food, the tools, the actual knowledge of how to operate in a world that has been completely unplugged.
And so, we're left with the question that the source material itself poses. And it's both a summary of the mission and really a direct challenge to you. When the digital mirage finally evaporates and the grid goes dark, will you be the anchor for your lineage?